I put up my Christmas lights in October. I know, I can practically feel your rage all the way over here. I have a good reason, I swear. I live in Minnesota, and it gets cold and snowy fast. I don't like standing on a ladder and stringing lights in the snow and ice, so I have to get it done early. If it makes you feel any better, I don't actually turn them on until December. Even I have principles. I'm rambling, sorry. It's just that I'm not exactly sure where to start with all this. So I'm starting with the Christmas lights. And of course, where I found them. They were actually in the attic when I moved in. I bought the house from the bank on the condition that I became responsible for everything inside. It wasn't too bad. Mostly old junk in the attic and basement, along with some furniture left over from the previous owner. Nothing seemed very valuable or unique, so what I didn't keep was either tossed or donated. Among the things I kept were the holiday decorations. Most of the decorations were quite old, though they had obviously been treated with care. I decided against putting most of them up. Maybe next year, I told myself as I packed them carefully back into their boxes. I wasn't sure who the previous owner was, but they clearly loved these decorations. Perhaps they'd want them back someday. The only thing I did put up were the Christmas lights. I found them in an old trunk shoved in the back of the basement. They were threaded through some garland and in pretty good condition. I didn't even have to replace any bulbs. Lucky me, right? So I hauled my ass up to the roof and strung the lights around the house just in time for pumpkin spice season. They stayed up there, unlit, until December 1st rolled around. At that point, I figured it was safe to turn them on and put out the rest of the decorations. I built snowmen for the front yard. I hung popcorn garlands from the tree along with my favorite keepsake ornaments that had survived the trek from Indiana. I didn't have any halls to deck, so I settled for the living room, hanging holly from every available surface and plenty of mistletoe. By the time I was finished, it looked like a Hallmark store had vomited all over my house. I was pretty pleased with myself. And of course, I put silhouettes of Santa, his sleigh, and the reindeers on the roof. That was a big hit with the kids. They'd point to it as they passed by. Everything was going great, until about a week before Christmas, when I came outside to see a teary-eyed little girl standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. Before I could ask her what was wrong, she sniffled and cried out, "Where'd they go?" She pointed to my roof. I followed her line of sight, only to discover that Santa and his crew had vanished. Or, more likely, fallen over from the wind. But I couldn't exactly say that to a crying 7-year-old, now could I? Santa and his reindeer had to go to the grocery store to get Rudolph some reindeer treats. They ran out, but they'll be back soon.
They sell reindeer treats at the grocery store?
Her eyes went wide with wonder. Yep. The store keeps it stocked for the Christmas season. You'll have to ask your mom to show you the next time you go shopping. Anyway, they'll be back in a few hours, I promise. That seemed to mollify her. She skipped off into the horizon while I climbed back onto the roof, grumbling about whimsy and Christmas and the innocent wonder of children that I had sworn to uphold this season. When I finally reached the top of the roof, I found the decorations. They were laying there in the snow, torn to pieces. Rudolph's head had been ripped from his body. Santa was missing his arms entirely. And there was a strange lump of wood that looked suspiciously like a reindeer's tail. I looked at the carnage in bewilderment. Well, this sucks, I sighed, gathering up the pieces in defeat. As I toted them over to my ladder, I got this feeling that something else was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on what. I figured it out after I'd gotten all the pieces off the roof. I stood there, staring at my bare house, when I realized what was missing. The lights were gone. They'd been pulled right off my roof, probably by the same people who had fucked up Santa and his posse. Yeah, people fucking suck, I know. There was only so much that could be done, but I did it. A few hours later, a brand new homemade sign appeared in my front yard. It read, "Santa and his reindeer are getting ready for Christmas. Be back soon." I figured it would go over better than a headstone reading R.I.P. Santa and his friends. The lights, Well, that would just have to wait until I could buy another string. Or, hell, maybe I'd just wait for the lights until next year. I was a little more concerned that someone had been fucking around on my roof to care much about the destruction of my hard work. The next few days were quiet. I had contacted the police department to let them know what had happened, of course, but they assured me it was probably teenage vandals who likely wouldn't be back. "You're safe, ma'am. Oh, and sorry about your decorations. Happy holidays." I tried to put it out of my head. I told myself that was the end of it. The funny thing about endings is that they never seem to come when they're supposed to. See, I started hearing things. Strange rustling noises, mostly late at night. If I hadn't been awake getting into Santa's eggnog, I wouldn't have noticed them. But as it was, I couldn't ignore it. I walked through the house once or twice, trying to figure out where it was coming from, but it always fell silent when I passed by. Things started going missing, too, mostly in the living room. First, it was a few ornaments from the Christmas tree. Then it was little knickknacks from the fireplace mantel. After a while, I noticed that the tree itself started looking sparse, almost like something was taking entire branches off of it while visions of sugar plums danced in my head. I felt like I was going crazy. Things were just far enough to the left of normal that I couldn't decide if it was really happening or if I needed to get checked for a brain tumor. As Christmas drew nearer, I became even more tense. Once or twice I considered checking into a hotel for a few days just in case something really was happening. But, well, I wanted to spend Christmas at my new home. It felt important at the time. 'Twas the night before Christmas when everything went to shit. The fireplace was roaring, and a cup of hot chocolate, with no small amount of Bailey's Irish cream, was warming my hands. The twinkling lights of the Christmas tree kept me company as I reminisced about holidays past. For a few hours, all was calm. I felt like I was in a Terry Redlin painting. Then I noticed a funny smell. It was smoke. Which, okay, I had a fire going in the fireplace, but it was a lot of smoke. Smoke that should have been going up the chimney instead. I looked over to the fireplace just in time to see something drop down from the chimney. It bounced on a log and dropped into the hearth, far enough away from the fire that I could grab it and take a closer look. It was a small nutcracker. It used to sit on my fireplace mantel, but had gone missing a few days before. I had a collection of nutcrackers small enough to fit in the palm of my hand, and this was one of my favorites. It was blackened by smoke, but I could still make out its police uniform. Suddenly, a horrible vision flashed in my head. A news story some years ago about a person playing Santa Claus trying to crawl down the chimney and becoming stuck. His dead body discovered months later by his family. I thought of the missing items, the destroyed decorations, the smoke filtering into the living room that was a sure sign of a blocked chimney. I grabbed the fire poker in both hands as I called out, "Hello? Is someone up there?" I strained to listen. Under the crackling of the fire, I could hear that strange rustling noise again. I was certain it was coming from the chimney. "Who's there?" No answer. I should call the police, I thought to myself. I should call them and tell them to come and get this fucking person out of my fucking chimney. But what if no one's there? My brain hissed back. What if you're just wasting their time? Maybe it's all in your head. I hesitated for a long moment. Finally, I had an idea. And, like the Grinch, it was a wonderful, awful idea. I inched closer to the hearth, aiming the fire poker up into the chimney. I was just gonna poke at whatever was up there. If it was a person, maybe it would shout. If it was just debris and I was nuts, maybe it would fall down. Or maybe nothing would happen. Yeah, I'm not sure where I was going with that either. In my defense, you try dealing with a possible crazy vandal stuck inside your chimney when you're half drunk. I paused for just a moment, just to acknowledge how dumb my idea was. And then I very tentatively, very carefully, poked. I definitely hit something, although it didn't feel very solid. There was a lot of give. There was also a lot more rustling. Then, the poker was ripped out of my hands and practically flew up the chimney. A few long moments later, whatever had taken residence in my chimney spat the poker back out with such force that it bounced out onto the carpet. I stumbled back away from the fireplace. Bad idea, bad idea, bad idea! I cast about wildly for the phone. The rustling grew louder. I could hear more stuff dropping down into the fireplace. I finally spotted my phone and lunged for it, dialing 911 as I turned around to see what the fuck was happening to my fireplace.
Hello, 911. Please state the location of your emergency.
Please, I am at 211 34th Street. There's something...
Ma'am? Ma'am, are you okay?
My legs were yanked out from under me and I went down hard, my phone falling out of my hand as I shrieked. I saw stars as my head slammed against the ground. Darkness swarmed my vision, and it took everything in me not to pass out right there. Eventually, I was able to blink my way back into reality, at which point I discovered that I was slowly being dragged toward the fireplace. Protruding from the chimney was a familiar string of garland threaded through with Christmas lights. The end of the strand was wrapped tight around my ankles. The fake pine needles scratched at my exposed skin. The lights had clearly been on for some time, as they were hot against me. I stared in disbelief for a moment before I realized I was going to get dragged straight into the fire. I started struggling, trying to get some leverage to claw my way back to the couch. My fingers curled into the carpet desperately, but the garland appendage was far stronger than I. Soon, I was only a foot from the fire. I could feel the soles of my feet start to sweat through my socks. Let go! I thrashed, trying to dislodge its grip. It held firm. As I got closer to the chimney, I could hear a new, strange noise coming from inside it. A groaning, gurgling sound. It sounded hungry. Before I could ruminate on that, the fucking thing dragged my feet straight into the fire, and I panicked. A surge of adrenaline went straight to my brain, saying, hot, fire, bad, get out, bad, fire, ow, ow, ow! I twisted and jerked and spasmed. The thing held on to me for dear life, trying but failing to wrestle me into submission. As I struggled, I felt my hand knock against something, and I grabbed it on instinct. I lifted it in front of my eyes to see what it was. The fire poker. I raised it above my head, giving a horrible shriek as I brought it down as hard as I could on the garland. It spasmed as though hurt. Encouraged, I brought the poker down again and again until it loosened its grip. I yanked my feet out from the fire and dragged myself backward. They were badly burned, and I knew I couldn't stand on them, so I fought my way to my knees instead to face off against the horrible thing. I'd clearly made it angry, the way it was whipping back and forth. I stayed completely still as I watched it, poising myself to strike at the earliest opportunity. It came speeding at me head-on. I brought down the poker like a spear with all the strength I had. A great, roaring shriek sounded from the fireplace as I pierced it straight through. The Christmas lights on the garland started to pop, one by one, the plastic bulbs exploding as the thing writhed in pain. Thick, black liquid began to drip out of the wound, sizzling against the floor like acid. I'd used so much force that I'd stuck the poker right through the carpet and into the floorboards underneath. The garland struggled madly to get free, but I put my full weight on it, as well as I could without getting to my feet, and held it there, refusing to let it get away. I was so focused on my task, so overwhelmed by the creature's terrible screaming, but I didn't hear the pounding on my door. I was utterly shocked when the police burst into my living room, guns drawn, horrified eyes drawn to the evidence of my battle with the garland. Before anybody could move, the garland gave a terrible heave and tore itself off from the poker, leaving half of itself behind on my floor. As I stared at it in disbelief, it pulled its injured appendage back up into the chimney. I could hear it scurrying, scraping, shifting to get away. I'm sure the police could too, but they were more interested in what it had left behind, and for good reason. The garland string on my carpet had begun to smoke, though it wasn't on fire. A horrible, putrid smell filled the room, and I clamped my hand over my mouth and nose, struggling not to gag. In the next instant, the garland was reduced to ash in front of our very eyes. By the time we gathered our wits, the thing in the chimney was long gone. It had scuttled out the top of the chimney, off to wreak havoc somewhere else, which was quite the dilemma for the police officers who responded to my 911 call. After all, they couldn't very well tell the townsfolk to be on the lookout for sentient Christmas lights and garland, could they? I spent Christmas in a hospital bed, getting treatment for the burns on my feet. It took me weeks to be able to walk again. I have permanent scarring now. I suppose I should be grateful it isn't somewhere more noticeable. I don't put up Christmas lights anymore. Or a garland. And I bricked up the chimney and the fireplace, just to be certain. Oh, by the way, about those other Christmas decorations I found. I took care of those with a nice big bonfire in the backyard. After all, I don't think the previous owner is going to want them back. If they're still alive, that is. So, this Christmas, do yourself a favor. Get rid of your lights. Toss out your garland. And remember, Santa isn't the only thing that comes down the chimney on Christmas Eve.